Time now to turn to the French newspapers then. Elena's with us here on SAT, and the economy all over the French newspapers as ever, really.
Yes, let's start with the business papers then. Let's start with Les Echos. Their headline today is the shock of the debt. The shock, according to them, is that next year France is going to have to pay back 48.8 billion euros in debt repayments. That's more than the education budget. Same stories on the front page of La Tribune. They've got President Nicolas Sarkozy under the headline Mr. Taxman. They say he's going to have to raise taxes to unprecedented levels in the next budget if France is going to pay back its debts. They say he's partly responsible in their editorial on the inside. They say he made 10 billion euros of tax cuts when he first came into power to fulfil his electoral promises. Now he's having to go back on most of that because he's desperate to preserve France's AAA credit rating. But they do ask in their editorial if maybe it might not be better to take a cut in the credit rating and have some more prospects for growth in the future, rather than do everything to keep the agencies happy and end up with much higher unemployment. Le Figaro has the same story on their front page, but they, as ever, are much more keen on bigging up Nicolas Sarkozy's policy. Their headline is Unprecedented Efforts to Reduce the Deficit, and in their editorial they say whoever wins next year's election, they must continue with the austerity measures. It's the only way to go.
Now, you mentioned Nicolas Sarkozy here. The corruption scandals continue to go on. You've got a new one for us today,
We've got some phone hacking today, clearly crossed the channel. The headline on the front of the Libération today is at the fall of the president's men. We've got 7 mugshots here on the front, all French notables known to be close friends to Nicolas Sarkozy, who have all recently been either arrested or summoned for questioning in different corruption affairs. Of course, we've had plenty. We've had bags, briefcases and brown envelopes stuffed with cash. But today the focus is on phone hacking, and this man, Philippe Courroy, who it's thought is soon to be charged with hacking the phones of Le Monde journalists over what they knew about the Bettencourt affair. Now, he was the state prosecutor who was in charge of that. He's the state prosecutor of Nanterre in the west of Paris, and he's accused of having hacked those journalists' phones to find out where they were getting the information from. Of course, this is about the case of France's richest woman who supposedly gave Sarkozy and other right-wing politicians brown envelopes stuffed with cash. Now, the France's top cop is the senior police commissioner is also on this front page, alongside the head of the intelligence service. They're both accused of having helped organise that phone tapping. And Libération on the inside has a biting profile of the state prosecutor, Philippe Courroy, saying he's spent his whole career trying to prevent senior right-wing politicians getting involved in political and financial scandals. They say he spends far too much time in nice restaurants dining with those politicians, giving rise to endless conflicts of interest.
Lots of scandals. And on the other side of the political spectrum, Nicolas Sarkozy's opponents, the socialists, all 6 candidates on the television again last night.
Yes, they're here on the front page of Le Parisien. You might remember a couple of days ago I was telling you the papers were terribly worried the debate was going to be so boring no one was going to watch it. Now, Le Parisien actually says they succeeded last night in making the debate a lot more interesting than the previous one.
So you can say a lot more boring. Okay,
no,
good.
a lot more interesting.
Right.
According to Le Parisien, anyway, they say they managed to engage the voters a lot more. They actually attacked each other on economic subjects, and you might remember I was standing here maybe a week ago saying that they were worried that no one was going to vote in their primary election. Now, according to an article in here, in François, they're worried that too many people might vote. They're going to print twice the number of ballot papers that they were going to and get twice the number of volunteers to man those polling stations so the queues aren't too long. They're saying a good participation might be 2 million people, but they're getting optimistic over at the Socialists. They're printing 6 million ballot papers, apparently.
Okay, I'm finally going to mention a story we're going to be covering a lot later on here on France 24. Dominique Strauss-Kahn meeting his attempted rape accuser today.
Yes, Le Figaro has a good explanatory article of what's meant to happen. Dominique Strauss-Kahn and his accuser Christine Bannon aren't meant to actually face off with each other. They're just meant to both answer questions from investigators about just what happened in a flat in Paris in 2003. Of course, their accounts are diametrically opposed. She says he attempted to rape her. His account has been rather contradictory, though, the paper says. He first said it was just a normal interview. Now he's admitted he attempted to kiss her, and so it's up to the investigators to decide which of them is telling the truth.
Oh, to be a fly on the wall. Elena, thanks very much. Elena there with the French newspapers today.